All eyes are on the Fulton County Courthouse in Atlanta today, where Rudy Giuliani spent more than 6 hours testifying before a special grand jury in Georgia's investigation of efforts by Donald Trump and others to overturn his 2020 election defeat there. Now, USA Today is reporting that Giuliani's attorney, Robert Costello, declined to say whether Trump's personal lawyer invoked his right against self-incrimination, but he did add that it was, quote, cordial. Whatever that means. It was just a few days ago that prosecutors informed Giuliani that he was now a target in the investigation, making him the closest person to Trump to reach that status. Now, while we don't know what Giuliani was saying or not saying inside the courtroom, grand juries are, of course, closed. He's been talking to friendly media this week about the Georgia case. Take a listen.
I was his lawyer of record in that case. The statements that I made are either attorney-client privileged because they were between me and him, or they were being made on his behalf in order to defend him.
Joining me now is Tamara Halloran. She's a senior reporter for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and Frederick Lawrence. He's a former assistant U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York and a distinguished lecturer at Georgetown Law Center. Very happy to have you both here. Frederick, I want to start off with you, get the legal perspective here. Can Giuliani actually invoke attorney-client privilege here? Is that even allowed?
It is allowed for certain kinds of communication. Ordinarily, if you represent a client, what you say in furtherance of that client's representation is privileged, and you can invoke the attorney-client privilege. The big exception here is that that does not cover criminal behavior by the attorney himself. Think of it this way. Client comes into your office and says, I just stole a car. You are allowed to talk to that client about how you're going to defend him for that charge of theft. You cannot say to the client, here's how you hotwire a car so you can go out and steal one. That's not privileged. That's not confidential.
Do you think that Giuliani is willing to go to jail to protect Trump?
He wouldn't be the first. There are a lot of people who are prepared to take the risk in order to defend him. So I would imagine before it comes to that he would invoke the Fifth Amendment, which is a different privilege. He does have the right not to incriminate himself. Now, I heard in your opening that they said it was cordial. If Bob Costello says it was cordial, that doesn't sound like the Fifth Amendment, but it's very hard to know. Nobody knows what went on inside that room except for the grand jurors, the prosecutor, and Mr. Giuliani himself.
Well, let's talk about the grand jurors, Tamara, because I want to shift a bit to Lindsey Graham. We'll get back to Giuliani, but focusing on Graham just for a second. Something I find very interesting, I grew up in Atlanta, and Fulton County is one of the most reliably Democratic counties in the entire nation. It's also a county that's a majority people of color. Is there some irony in the fact that Lindsey Graham tried to have black votes thrown out, basically, and now faces the consequence of his actions by grand jurors that likely look like some of the people whose votes he was trying to get thrown out? And how perilous of a situation do you think Lindsey Graham is in down there?
Well, right now, a lot of the maneuvering we've seen with Senator Graham has been in federal court. Just this week, a federal U.S. District Court judge told him that she would not be quashing his subpoena. She directed him to come testify before the special grand jury next week. He's asking for a pause in that so he can appeal this ruling up to the conservative 11th Circuit Court of Appeals. And his lawyers are insisting that he was told that he was not a target of this investigation, that he was merely being, asking to give testimony as a witness to all of this. And we'll see where all of this leads. So far, judges have not been willing to kill subpoenas for anyone, including members of Congress, members of the legislature. And now our own governor has been moving to quash his subpoena as well. But so far, judges are saying, nope, you've got to go before the special grand jury. There may be guardrails about what may or may not be asked because of things like legislative privilege, but they still have had to go in and testify.
I want to stick with that. Well, you brought up the Republican governor there, Brian Kemp. You have new reporting out today around that situation of him trying to get out. But Brian Kemp was not necessarily Trump's favorite. I mean, Trump endorsed his opponent, and Brian Kemp, of course, remained blindly loyal, as they're known to do in the MAGA cult. Why do you think he's so resistant and hesitant to testify?
It seems like there's been a real communication breakdown between the governor's office and the Fulton DA's office about kind of the questions, the types of questions that could be asked, the circumstances, kind of what is under oath, what's on the record, what is and is not allowed to be asked. And remember, the governor is up for re-election this year. He faces Democrat Stacey Abrams in a rematch of their 2018 match against each other. And I mean, certainly there are political points to be scored here. He's arguing that the Fulton DA is playing politics with a lot of this. I'm sure she will be arguing the same in her response to the governor as well. And this is a moment where you see many Republicans here in Georgia who are arguing that this investigation is a partisan witch hunt, and they're trying to use it on the campaign trail.
Well, I'd argue that Brian Kemp has engaged in voter suppression for decades, as evidenced by so many incidents down there that I could recount. But we haven't even the time. That's how much it's been. Frederick, I want to come back to you on the Giuliani situation. Take a listen, because in this battle that we're seeing happen between Trump and the legal system, there's also sometimes battles between he and his allies. Now, he and Rudy Giuliani have been BFFs so far, but Giuliani seems to keep a card in his back pocket. Take a listen.
I mean, I've seen things written like, he's going to throw me under the bus.
Right.
When they say that, I say, he isn't, but I have insurance.
He has insurance. What insurance might he have, do you think? And can that comment come back? I mean, legally, I know this isn't an episode of Law and Order that gets wrapped up in 1 hour, but legally, can someone ask him? You mentioned that you had insurance on him. Expound, please.
I don't think somebody would say that in front of a grand jury, but I tell you, a prosecutor might say that to his lawyer off the record and say, look, he said he had insurance. This would be the time to come forward with that, because right now we're this far from indicting him. If he wants not to be indicted, then this is the time to talk. So I would read that as a signal that he was sending not only to the Trump organization, but also to the prosecutors, that if this thing reaches all the way to the water's edge, that he does have evidence he's prepared to provide.
It's interesting just hearing you talk about that, Frederick. It feels like this is language used to describe a crime syndicate. You know, this feels very much The Sopranos and not, a political system or organization. I want to play one last thing. This is from Giuliani's former press secretary, Ken Friedman, describing Giuliani as nervous. Take a listen.
He knows he lied to legislators. He knows that he concocted this false elector scheme. He knows he lied for his client, and he knows we all know. It's clear. Rudy flew too close to the sun. He got too close to Trump. He got burned. At this point in his life, his goal is to die a free man.
Tamar, how do you think that the people of the grand jury, if they're allowed to see that or if they've seen that, how might they receive that and respond to that when hearing his testimony?
I have no idea. This grand jury has been pretty leak-proof at this point. We don't know who these folks are. As you mentioned, Fulton County is a pretty darn blue county. Joe Biden won with something like 72% of the vote. And still there are folks who voted for Trump. And as I've spoken to some witnesses who have come to testify before the grand jury, including in the Secretary of State's office, they've mentioned that they've had grand jurors ask them about whether there was widespread fraud in the election. So I'm not going to pretend to know what's in their heads. But you mentioned kind of comparing all this to a potential crime syndicate. And something that the Fulton DA, Fani Willis, has mentioned repeatedly is that she's looking at racketeering charges potentially for this case. That's something that of course, Giuliani helped pioneer in the 80s and 90s in New York.
Wow. It all comes full circle. Well, thank you so much, Tamara Hallerman, for being here, and Frederick Lawrence. Thanks to you both for giving important context.